Sedona is an incredibly stunning area located in north-central Arizona. It's characterized by its massive sandstone formations, which I found to look very similar to Zion National Park in Utah. That surprised me only because these two places aren't really that close to each other at all, but they're both absolutely worth visiting for their own array of reasons. Contrary to popular belief, Sedona isn't protected as a singular national site. I believe the intention at one point was to make it a national park or national monument, but due to the coexisting homes and the town of Sedona located in the midst of the Rocky Spires, this was never possible. Today, it falls under the Coconino National Forest, and a large swath of its land is National Wilderness Area. There's also two state parks on either end of the Sedona Valley, neither of which we'd have the opportunity to visit. During our recent Southwest road trip, we unfortunately only had time to spend one day in Sedona. Though I would have loved to have more time, I felt that we did a great job experiencing the area considering our options. We went on 3 of Sedona's signature hikes, of which there are dozens and dozens of trails scattered about the landscape. Interestingly, a lot of these spots have been heavily geotagged on social media, and I have a few thoughts about that. For one, I wouldn't know of many of these spots if it weren't for those posts, but two, I do believe if you decide to visit any spot in nature, there's a responsibility you have to preserve the environment. This has resulted in Sedona becoming increasingly popular, and I think you could make the argument it was the most crowded place we visited on our road trip, considering we were there on a random weekday. Still, I found Sedona to be quite spotless, which makes sense because a majority of the people I saw hiking on the trails were young. From what I've heard, no matter what day you're in Sedona, you will be faced with sizable crowds, which is why you'll need to strategically pick what hikes you'll want to go on and when. Obviously, a lot of the busiest hikes are popular for a reason, and we made sure to prioritize some of those too. But we also had some moments of peace and quiet here, so let me dive into my suggestions if you only have one day in Sedona. Our first destination was Devil's Bridge, which from what I had heard is the spot most susceptible to overcrowding. We tackled this in a variety of ways, 1, utilizing a less popular trail, and 2, getting there very early. There's 3 separate options to get to Devil's Bridge, the first of which being less than 2 miles out and back. This requires you to park at the main trailhead, which is only accessible with a high clearance vehicle as the road to get there is quite rough. Options 2 and 3 involve hiking to the main trailhead and extending your hike if you have any other type of vehicle. The most popular starting route is off of Dry Creek Road and is 3.9 miles out and back. In addition to the crowds, this requires you to walk through a sandy wash most of the way there, which didn't sound the most exciting to me. My recommended approach is option number 3, hiking to Devil's Bridge from the Mescal Trailhead, which is 4 miles out and back. This hike is pretty low effort as it's flat up until you get to the last half a mile. Not to mention, our first views looking out at the massive sandstone formations were wonderful. One of the big differences between Sedona and a place like Zion is Sedona is a lot more forested. To some, that might go without saying because it is located in a national forest, but I think it adds so much beauty to this area and helps distinguish it from other locations in the Southwest. The last section of this trail requires more than 500 feet of elevation gain, so it definitely has some steep bits to it. But it's a lot of fun, and your view opens up revealing more spectacular scenery. When we got to Devil's Bridge, I was surprised by how incredible of a scene it was. This is one of those spots that I believe deserves its notoriety across social media. A few locals had told me that it was a bit overrated and wasn't worth doing in favor of some of the other hikes in the park, but I personally disagree. I imagine they say this because it does get very busy here, and though we got there at 7:30 a.m. on a weekday, you still felt a little congested at the bridge. I'd understand that if you visited on a Saturday or holiday break, it could be miserably crowded up here. For us, there was like a 2-person wait to walk across the bridge and take pictures, and though it looked intimidating from a distance, there's plenty of space to move around at the top. Overall, I love Devil's Bridge, and I think the backdrop combined with the natural bridge itself made it one of my favorite arch formations we saw on the entire trip. But up next, we wanted to pay a visit to a less crowded place, so we made our way to the Boynton Canyon area. It seems that this would be a much easier place to find parking and take in the serenity of the landscape. The Boynton Canyon Trail leads to a few different destinations. There's the Boynton Canyon Vortex, which is about a mile out and back and provides wonderful views of the area. Also noteworthy is its designation as a vortex, which is where there's a particularly high concentration of energy. This is something Sedona is well known for, and there's a handful of other vortexes in the area as well. Some say they can feel movement in the ground from all the energy, but from what I can tell, it is mostly spiritual, which is why you'll see a lot of people resting and meditating. I didn't personally get it, but if these vortexes can help other people, more power to them. Our main goal of visiting the Boynton Canyon area was to hike to the Subway Cave, which is 4.4 miles out and back. This route follows the main Boynton Canyon Trail for the majority of the way there, but then splits off as you near your destination. It can be pretty easy to miss the turnoff, and the trail is much less wide and trafficked as a whole. This is another mostly flat hike, but there is some steep parts towards the end, with the steepest being the final climb into the Subway Cave. But this was a lot of fun for me, and the reveal that you were at the bottom of the cave during the climb was very cool. The Subway Cave was formed by a partial collapse of the cave's roof and offers a spectacular view of the steep sandstone cliffs. It's obviously unique for the gap in the middle, and something really cool is you can walk on either side of the cave to expose more of the view. On the right hand side, rounding the corner reveals plenty more space to take in the scenery and a small continuation of the rounded cave-like feature of the subway itself. You do have to be careful walking around here as there's nothing but a steep drop-off on the other side of the cliff. It's definitely exhilarating, but very beautiful. Once we got back to the car, it was time for lunch, and even though I didn't get any videos of any of the places we ate at in Sedona, I did just want to mention that the food here was impeccably good. This fueled us up for my most anticipated hike of the day, Cathedral Rock. Cathedral Rock is always at the top of people's to-do list when they come to Sedona, and I can certainly understand why. Likewise though, it's also one of the busiest locations, and we had to wait a good 10 minutes before finding a parking spot, which I understand is actually on the shorter side. The hike is just 1.2 miles out and back, but very steep as you're basically going uphill the entire time. Some of the scrambling and climbs were definitely reminiscent to something you'd see on Angel's Landing at Zion. I think this is more strenuous than that hike, but it's also much more approachable and not nearly as dangerous. The views from the trail were absolutely spectacular virtually the entire way to the top. It grants a bird's eye view of Sedona's lush valley and the stunning rock formations out in the distance. Not to mention, as you make your way up to the top, you have these enormous rocky spires in front of your face. Your end goal is basically making it to the base of these spires, and that provides a secondary, incredible view of the area. I might be in the minority when I say the view in the opposite direction is still my favorite, but this is nothing to scoff at either, and it's absolutely worth the hike to get there. Heck, this is one of those trails where even if there weren't a standout final view, I'd still consider it a must visit. Cathedral Rock was one of the sleeper hit best hikes of the trip for me, and my personal favorite thing we got to do while in Sedona. All things considered, I had a fantastic time exploring this unique landscape. Sedona was a pretty refreshing experience for me, and there's a variety of reasons why. 1, we had rarely been in dense forestry like this for the entire duration of the trip, and 2, it was the first place I'd visited in Arizona that really took my breath away. As you'll see in the last 2 videos from our road trip, there's much more where that came from, but Sedona stands on its own as a place I'd highly recommend to visit. And if it were a national park, it would most definitely rank in the upper half for me. If you've been here before, leave a comment letting me know what you thought of Sedona and what other hikes you'd recommend for a future visit. If you enjoyed today's video, I'd really appreciate it if you could give it a like and subscribe to Travel Dash for more content like this in the future. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye guys.